Welcome back to another Purpose Served podcast episode. I'm your host, Darren Wingfield, your legendary host. Thank you guys for tuning in yet again. We 70 plus podcast episodes deep. Now we're over 1,000 podcasts, only being 70 podcasts in. And for that, I truly appreciate you guys for downloading this content. I really do appreciate it. At first, when I first started, this felt like, I always say, it felt like nobody was listening. It felt like I was talking to myself. Really weird. But now that I know that you guys are out there serving your purpose and this is having an impact on your lives, I always feel the need that I have to keep going with this. Shout out to everybody that's stateside, that's downloading, and especially shout out to the people that's in Germany. I constantly see you guys like tuning in. I really appreciate it. These last couple of weeks was interesting for me, to be quite honest. Shout out to Johnny, Couture Barbershop. I get my hair cut over there. I've been having workshops at his barbershop, in-person workshops, where I'm teaching this thing called The Process to young adults. And pretty much, I talked about on this podcast, the process, talked about the roadmap, stages of intention, all of these different types of concepts. And the whole point of this workshop is how to get people to go from ideas to results. And, I've been blessed and had the opportunity in the space and work with somebody that's allowing me to do that. And he has special plans of his own. Really creative dude. And through this, I was able to be on another podcast. It was last Wednesday, actually, the Unmasked Podcast. Shout out to Ayo, shout out to Mally, shout out to Zay. They really got something special going on. And I'm going to put the link to their podcast down below. But through them, I'm seeing that the younger generation, they're high spirited. There's something within them. They got these strong visions that they feel a need that they have to act on. They're seeing the times that we're living in, and also notice that things is changing. But I'm also seeing that they're ready to get things done now, and I didn't think that there was a whole lot of that, like assertiveness out there, especially like with young adults. It just seemed like, in that time in your life, you're, from, I want to say 18 to 25, the biggest thing, it seemed like the main priority, the main focus is enjoying yourself, as you should. Life, you shouldn't take life serious all the time. That's low-key my problem. I really do, for the most part, I take life real serious, because for the most part, I didn't take it serious at one point. And ultimately, God showed me that I was robbing myself. I wasn't listening to my soul, and I wasn't going on the path that I was supposed to be on. The person that I was supposed to become, I wasn't on that path. So everything had to go in a certain manner to bring me back and align me back with my soul. And the previous podcast episode, it was along the lines of that serious tone. I was talking a lot about the dark night of the soul, the shadow, all of these psychological aspects of ourselves that's trying to create balance through showing us, the things that we repress. And going back 3 years ago, I had a special person on this podcast by the name of Rick Paris. What led me to getting in contact with Rick, I was doing a lot of research on the universal mind. And the universal mind, just to show you guys the linear point A to point B that was going on, the universal mind led me to understanding a broader picture of what's going on that's outside of me. I don't know what was leading me there, but it felt like that's the direction that that I was supposed to be going, and that's what I was supposed to be understanding. And I had no clue what it was. But through that, I seen a video on Rick talking about the unconscious mind. I mean, the universal mind, and talking about his death experience, not a near death experience, but he got hit by a car, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. And he had a experience where he left his body and then came back into his body, because he realized he didn't want to die. It felt good, he said, being outside of his body, but then after that, he felt like he's still much more that he had to experience. So he said that he consciously put himself physically back into his body, and then, you know, what was waiting for him when he returned was all of that pain that he left, because he got hit by a car, you know, and it sent him through another windshield. Shout out to Rick. Still keep in touch with him to this day. You know, he had a profound impact on my life, but through him, it led me to understanding the unconscious mind. What is the collective unconscious, which led me to Joseph Campbell and the hero with 1,000 faces, the hero's journey. I learned a lot from reading that and listening to Joseph Campbell lectures. And Joseph Campbell led me to one of his sources of inspiration, which is somebody that I've been talking about a lot on this podcast, is Carl Jung, C.G. Jung, a psychiatrist, Swiss psychiatrist. And he dedicated his life to trying to understand the unconscious mind and what it meant collectively for all of us in the human race. That's a very, very, very daunting, tall task to accept of yourself and commit to it wholeheartedly. But through that, he experienced God. He had a knowing of God. Through that, the visions that he was having, he was able to see the visions of World War I before they popped off. You know, a month before it popped off, he was having the visions, and I believe in July, and months before that, you know, and then the following month, it actually happened. I bring up terms all the time where things that we, as a collective people throughout history, coin terms in our head, but these things are real. You know, illogical things, you know, or logic come from illogical things. I was talking to Johnny, who I mentioned earlier, about this last night. I was at his barbershop, you know, having a business meeting with him and going based off of that concept. And today, that's going to be the premise of this podcast episodes. We're going to be talking a lot about cycles and what cycles mean, how to recognize cycles, how to break out of cycles, and the cycle that we're currently living in right now. And I don't know if I brought this term up before from Carl Jung and that experience that he had with, you know, with his unconscious when he was wrestling deep down with like his psyche. He had coined the term the spirit of the time and the spirit of the depths. The spirit of the time was the governed ruler of the people in that present moment. And the spirit of the depths was everything that came before and everything that's going to come after, you know. And symbolically looking at this as a circle, there's no start point and there's no end point. It just is, you know. And that's how our minds work in a sense. And that's how everything around us work in a sense. Symbolically, we can look at cycles as a circle, you know. And cycles, when aware to them, you see them all the time. But a lot of us are unconscious to the fact of these cycles that we experience. For those of you that graduated from high school, that was a cycle in itself. You came in as a freshman and you left as seniors, but every single year that is happening at any given high school freshmen are coming in and seniors are leaving every single year. That's a cycle. We have 365 days in a year, and that's a cycle. Within that cycle, you got 4 seasons. Within that cycle, you have 12 months. And for example, that 365 days that I talked about, that's in reference of another cycle. If you guys can recognize it, that's the earth going around the sun. The sun has a cycle too. The cycle, the sun is also moving around something else. Our solar system is cycling around something else. You know, our Milky Way is cycling around something else. So unconsciously, like I said, even though we're unaware to this, these things are automatically, they're happening. They're happening. So at first, you got to first recognize, perceive that a cycle is going on, and then you'll be able to think it through. And I'm big on understanding things at its most fundamental level, right? And what precedes thinking is perception. In order to think about something, you have to perceive, you have to see what it is, and then think it through. But cycles are already there before the perceiving, before the thinking, you know? And symbolically speaking, you know, I don't know if I just mentioned this, but they're very, very symbolic to the shape of a circle. Yet again, there's no start point and end point to a circle. I'm pretty sure that I mentioned that. And within a circle, there's unlimited possibilities. Within a circle, there's unlimited possibilities outside a circle. And if you notice, a lot of cities, towns, is based off of this concept of circles, and also putting a square within a circle to create structure within that. And then putting a triangle within a circle to represent hierarchy, right? If you guys are following me. So the circle is the overseeing everything, the omnipresence, God, awareness, you know? And ultimately speaking, when you're thinking about this, you want to fall in line with a cycle. But you also want to understand that, you know, I don't know if you guys ever heard the term Axis Mundi. Axis Mundi is a term for the heavens and the earth connecting. And symbolically, they use a tree. I'm throwing symbolism at you guys a lot today. The last 2 episodes I threw a lot of symbolism at you guys. And the reason being is because through symbolism, there's infinite amount of meaning that people can pull from it. Symbolism also represents our unconscious mind as well, you know. And I think throughout this podcast, I mentioned symbolism so much, you know, but you have to be quiet to be able to understand, this. Now, going back to the Axis Mundi, right? This is where the heaven and the earth connect. This is where the heaven and the earth meet, right? And symbolically, this is the tree. So I don't know if you guys ever heard the term, like, you know, a tree can, you know, get into heaven based off of the depths of where the roots can get into hell, you know? And you don't have one without the other. And last week, or last previous podcast episode, I was speaking big on wholeness. Cycles represent wholeness. Cycles represent something coming to completion, you know? And completion don't necessarily mean end. Completion can be, this is what it is, you know. This is simply what it is. And going back to a structure within a circle, that's how you break cycles, to be quite honest. A structure helps you recognize that circle for what it is. And through creating a structure within a cycle, you can break a cycle. But if you don't understand that you are in the cycle, you're just going to keep falling into the cycle. You get what I'm saying? But oftentimes when you break a cycle, you're going to have to fall into another cycle. This is why practice is important This is why discipline is important. This is why challenges are important. What comes with challenges, what comes with discipline, what comes with practice, you're developing balance, ultimately speaking. And through balance, that's another form of a circle. Through balance, that's symbolic of a tree. And a tree starting point was never that tree for what you see. It oftentimes was a seed that had to submit itself. This is the perception. So I'm using a tree right now as an analogy to how our minds work in our development as a human being. And comparing that seed to us literally being a seed in a woman's womb and then coming out and making our own roots, perceiving our own world that's around us, not knowing what's going on and getting grounded with the structure. And this is what I mean. When you go into a classroom, when you're a kid, what's the shape of this classroom? Is it a circle? Is it a triangle? Is it a pentagon? What shape was your classroom? What were you learning in the classroom? You were learning structure. And structure is important for foundation, but ultimately the structure don't ensue that you're going to get to where you got to go. The structure only show that you got a foundation. That's it. All buildings have a foundation. All buildings have a structure, right? But stepping outside of that, what's the higher aim? And through this, we attach goals to this. We attach goals to these higher aims. And it's very, very, very important through the structure that you immerse yourself into that higher aim. Create discipline around it. Create a cycle around it. Day in and day out. Live your life through that aim. And you'll be surprised in a short amount of time what you created for yourself. You'll be super duper surprised. A lot of us see cycles outside of ourselves and fall victim to those cycles that's outside of ourselves, not knowing due to the fact of our own uniqueness, we already have our own built-in cycle that we must trust. A lot of people are feeling discomfort right now because of the jobs that they're working, how hard they're working at their jobs. They're not feeling fulfilled. And it's so obvious why. It's so obvious why. When you don't recognize that you're falling in the loop, you're not taking advantage of these 24 hours. That's a cycle in itself. You're going to go through mad time. 20, 30, 40 years go by quick. And if you're young, you overlook that. And as time goes on, you're going to have something inside of you that's going to start dying. And that's a part of that will to live. And you're seeing a lot of people from ignoring their vision, from ignoring their own cycle that they must follow, that reaping and sowing for their own life. That's damaging. And that's damaging to everybody around. Because collectively speaking, when you buy into your own vision, when you buy into your own journey to get to that destination and fall into your own cycle, you could bless so many people. You could leave a tremendous impact on so many people. And as of late, I've been real life experiencing that. And understanding, going back to that concept of a tree. Trees been speaking to me. This sounds crazy. And no, I'm not a tree hugger. But I love being out in nature. But I was walking in the woods. I want to say like this is a while ago at this point. This is like 3 or 4 months ago. And I'm looking around, being really, really observant, but unintentionally. I'm looking for nothing, to be quite honest, but I'm looking. I'm really, really looking. That's how I am. And this is where these epiphanies always hit me from just looking at nature, you know? But I understood immediately, symbolically, what trees represented to me, you know? And I started understanding that purpose served was, for example, was a forest to me that's filled with trees. And when I first was doing this back in 2021, because I journal about this stuff, it felt like I wandered into a dark forest, and I didn't know my way in this forest. It was so unknown to me, scary, all different types of stuff that's in here that it's outside my comfort zone. But also this forest symbolically was like the outskirts of this forest was in a shape of a circle in bird's eye view, a very, very dense forest. And then collectively over time, when I just kept going, running this through, looking at it, reading it, I started understanding that every single tree within that forest were people. They were people in my head. And in the heart of this forest was the tree that represented me. And oftentimes, visually speaking, when I would visualize this tree, this forest and everything, the trees and these trees, it sounds crazy, will communicate information to me without talking. They'll communicate so much information to me directly without talking, and more information to me than people ever would, to be quite honest. And going in the forest outside of dreams, outside of me visualizing these things, I would feel that energy when I go into the woods, and these shapes, the meaning of these shapes and nature itself, they will all hit me like a ton of bricks. Like this all makes sense. I see the cycle, watching leaves fall, hit the ground, and then that serving as nutrients for the soil itself to produce more life for these trees, the rain, all storms hitting these trees of forest, and there's nothing they could do but stay grounded within these cycles. The trees experiencing all 4 seasons constantly in one spot, but trees are so powerful, you know? And oftentimes, throughout history, we were trees. Going back to the spirit of the times and the spirit of the depths, just to get a little deep with you guys in a very spiritual and religious way, right? Collectively speaking, people live with personal gods. People live with universal gods as well. But over time, these people believe their gods die when they die. So which means that over time, new gods going to have to always be reborn. This is why religions develop the way that they do. This is why new religions always form, you know? The people that was once involved, the people that was once doctrining other people, the people that was once living this religion, they died. A new form is going to come through that. Just like trees, just to be quite honest. And the way of life also is going to change with the changing of people's deep down core beliefs, especially when it comes to religion. And we're moving into a space right now where the idea of God is high-key dying. You know, a lot of people aren't going to synagogues, masjids, churches as much as they used to, which means that from a spiritual standpoint, people's spirituality is dying, you know, and they're leaning more so to logic, information, you know. But how are you going to lean to logic and information when that comes from things that's illogical, where that comes from things that we don't understand? Going back to the concept of perceiving and thinking, right? In order for these things to come about, we had to perceive something that we didn't know about, which is a high-key representation of our unconscious mind, you know? And then us being conscious, about the things that we're unconscious about, that changes the whole structure, that changes the whole entire cycle. And there's been people that deeply, deeply understood this throughout history, and they moved the needle, right? If you start living your life now based off of that deep sense of impact, that deep sense of God in you, there's only, from my biased standpoint, there's only one God. Everything that's outside of that, when it gets fragmented and broken up and everything, that's where the illusion starts to take place within the structure. But people not seeing the cycle, the never ending, that didn't have a start point, that don't have an end. We have to fall in that type of energy, because that's ultimately where we come from. We vibrate off that energy. We got to tap into it, because it provides change, man. If you don't want things to stay the same, which it never ever will, as time goes on, as more people enter this space, then people leave, things are naturally susceptible to change. Nothing's going to stay the same. Everything's becoming ass backwards, if you guys haven't noticed that yet. So it's best, that you guys start getting everything in order. So yeah, in order to get it in order, find the structure, associate that with the aim, and through that you're gonna find yourself in a different cycle, right? Because where we're going at now, and no matter what, this is what it is to live on this plane of existence. There's a lot of tension due to the fact that we have to stay balanced. We're living in a plane of existence where things are dynamic. Has to be this or that, but that's the illusion. That's what they want you to think. That's what they want you to see. That's what they want you to feel. And that's robbing you. It's like I keep saying, it's an illusion. It's not real. It's not. Don't let social media, you scrolling, fill you up with anxiety, fear, and doubt about yourself, because it's not real. Trees are real. Nature is real. Those clouds is real. The sky is real. You best align yourself with something like that than something that's trendy and people are going to forget about within a day or two, 3 days, 4 days, because that's what it is. People are exploiting people, copy and paste everything. Everybody got to be alike, but we're not. We're not. Y'all seeing them changes happen rapidly right in front of y'all faces. That's the spirit of the times that we're living in. It went from, I talked about this from 300, 400 years ago, the Renaissance era, the Renaissance age, of art changing completely, and then after that, the way that people started looking at science drastically changed. What I want to say 100, 200 years ago, science, history, all that type of stuff, which propelled us where we are literally right now, where we're living in the age of information. That's the current age that we're living in. And we're moving into a different time. We're moving into a different space that, it's unknown. It's very, very unknown. And with that, it can be extremely scary and daunting. But you have to trust yourself, serve your purpose. And the fact that you get thoughts, the fact that you get feelings, they're all associated with the vision that I talk about countless amount of times. Lean into it, act on it, create that structure from it, and follow that purpose. Follow your Axis Mundi. You are the Axis Mundi, and your soul is connected to the universe directly, which means that your soul knows what's best, and it's been with you since the beginning, and it's going to be with you all the way through. So align yourselves with that, man. Seriously. That's all I got to say for today. I appreciate you guys for tuning in yet again to another podcast episode. I'm going to be setting up, I always got my announcements at the end, but I'm going to be setting up, Yet it's still everything that I got in the motion is in the works, like in-person workshops. So I could come to you guys, but I'm starting to build a team around me that's helping me do this. So it is getting a little bit easier somewhat rather than just been doing all of this stuff by myself. That's been challenging. I'm not even going to lie to y'all. It's tiring. It's challenging, but it's something that I committed to, and I'm not going to stop. I can't. I don't have much of a choice. And I pray that you guys feel the same way. Not about what I got going on, but what you guys got going on. I pray that y'all serve your purpose and leave a tremendous impact on the world, on the whole entire world. That's my mission for Purpose Served and everybody that's involved in Purpose Served. And that's a tall task. But, illogic. How can we be logic about something that's that illogical? You feel me? But all in all, that wraps up today's podcast episode. I love y'all. Tap in, download the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and tap in. Serve your purpose. Treat the purpose as if it's the goal and take action towards it. That's the serving part. I'm out of here. Last but not least, deuces. Drops mic.